So in today's video, I want to discuss whether or not I should be considering returning to the Catholic Church. Now, I was born Roman, like I was a baptized Roman Catholic. My father was a Roman Catholic from Sri Lanka. Um, I went through all of the different sacraments, communion, reconciliation, confirmation. I went to church every Sunday until I was about 19 years old, where I think what was happening is I think it was an Easter break. I was just drinking so much with friends and doing all-nighters. And I think my dad, he just, even though obviously he wanted me to come to church with him every Sunday, my brother and sister had stopped going. All my friends, even though I went to a Catholic boys' school, they had mainly, gradually, most of them had stopped going to Mass. But I kept going because I felt religious and I didn't want to, I felt like it was following the crowd to say like, oh, I'm not going to go to church anymore because I'm bored. I thought that was not a good reason to stop going to church. I didn't really like going to church because I felt parishioners weren't very welcoming. I don't know, it's Melbourne in Australia, a bit of an Irish Catholic legacy. Nothing wrong with it, but you didn't feel part of the community. You just sort of sat there in Mass and went through, which is fine actually, looking back. But I stopped going because I was turning up hungover and my dad said, you don't have to come. And then and I think also because I was studying philosophy and I was going through Western philosophy, and I sort of lost my faith in a very typical way, like going through Immanuel Kant. And I remember there was a lot of investigation about like just Christianity being this religion where, the cleverness, the psychology of Christianity on the face of it anyway is, no matter how downtrodden you are, no matter how oppressed you are, you will, in the end, be in the kingdom of God. And you can always cling on to that hope, no matter how much suffering you go through. Of course, you can make an argument that it's a very, it's like an opiate, the opiate of the masses, like alcohol. The church and the pub subdue people because, you don't have to rise up. In fact, that's very much, it's a bit of a message in some ways anyway with Jesus Christ, where, it's not about, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. You don't have to rise up because you will win out in the end. So it's a very, it gives you a lot of hope, but, you could argue it's false hope and you should be fighting your oppressors, which, the interesting thing is historically Christians have fought against their oppressors. And maybe that's where the Catholic Church comes in. Sometimes it's nice that the Catholic Church goes through, has its own spin in a way. A lot of people argue that it's a pagan religion. A lot of American Christians will say that Catholicism has a lot of paganism in it and pagan rituals, and the Catechism is its own thing, of medieval philosophy and so on. But I think in the end, it's better to have this massive structure. I love the fact that here in Macedonia or Albania, I can go into a Catholic church and feel at home, just like in Australia, and I know the rituals and I know what I'm in for, and there's a clear power structure in the Catholic Church, so it doesn't offshoot into all these different directions, or like every Baptist church has got its own thing going on in America or wherever. But I'm obviously, I grew up Catholic, so I've got this bias towards Catholicism. I also associate Catholicism with lavishness, as you can see in my apartment here, and art and literature. Well, I don't know about literature, but like art and I also like the idea that Catholic countries, when you think of Catholic countries, you often think of heavy, not like drinking countries, like Ireland or Poland or France or Italy or Spain, and you sense this life in people, and you wonder if Catholicism gave them this life, while the Protestants of the more Germanic countries, you feel like they're more subdued and not as filled with life and art and passion. That's just an on the surface shallow look at Catholicism. You go to a Catholic church, it feels more grand. It feels, and it lifts you up. I like that aspect of Catholicism. I suppose I like the papal authority. It's strange because there have been so many bad popes. There have been so many scandals in the Catholic Church. There have been There's been so much corruption in the Vatican. It's like almost pure evil. Probably even now, if I go to the Vatican, I've never been to the Vatican. Maybe I should, but it can come across as like the actual power structures can come across as evil, and yet maybe I shouldn't think of it that way. I guess what I'm really wrestling with whether to go back to the Catholic Church, and as you can, I wonder if getting involved in the Catholic Church, I would finally, like, I've never had a long-term relationship, and I'm nearly 42, and I'm like, what's going on? And I wonder if I was to become Catholic, whether I'd get into a relationship or at least meet girls at Mass, chat up girls after Mass, you know what I mean? Ask them out for maybe that's a good reason to go back to the Catholic Church. I like Catholic girls in the same way that I like a lot of Muslim girls, but I never go out thinking, oh, I really like Church of England girls or Baptists, or evangelicals. It's always Catholics that I'm into. I don't know. Again, not the best reason to go back to the church, but some people would say it's as good a reason as any. Who are you to say that's not a good reason? I mean, there's something very spiritual and magical about attraction towards other human beings, right? It's not as shallow as you think. It might actually be the best reason to go back to the church. Anyway, are you a Catholic? Are you an anti-Catholic? Do you think I should go back to the Orthodox Church? I went to an Orthodox church that's just like next door, actually. I didn't know what to do because it's Orthodox. I didn't know the rituals, but it looked pretty good. Should I become Orthodox? Some people say that that's actually the one true religion, and I'm a massive. My favorite writer is Dostoevsky. I know it sounds pretentious, but he's into Pan-Slav Orthodox-ism. I don't know. Let me know your experience. I would love to hear your journey, and maybe you can have some sort of an influence on me. Anyway, that's all I've got to say, but let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.